Hello Year 3s, it's my turn to read the class novel to you this week. I've been really looking forward to reading it to you because I've been enjoying Mrs Gibbons' chapters that she read last week so much. So we're going to carry on with the train to impossible places, and we've got to chapter 6, which is called A First Class Escape. Susie leapt into the driver's cab and slammed the door behind her, only to find herself face to snout with Ursel, who reared up and bared her fangs. "Young lady," Stonker said, dusting himself down, "I've never liked being handled in such a fashion, and on my own locomotive. Why, the indignity of it." "I apologise all you want once we're out of here," Susie said, wondering whether she should be more scared of Crepuscular's creeping shadow or Ursel's dagger-like claws. "Just please hurry." "You're not going anywhere until you give a full account of yourself," he said. Ursel growled in agreement. Susie leaned past Ursel to argue with Stonker and got her first view inside the cab. It looked like a neat little sitting room, complete with floral wallpaper, a battered old armchair, and even a small bookcase in one corner. Another door was set into the rear wall, with a window on either side, through which she had a clear view of the tender, which was immediately behind the cab. Stonker and Ursel were both facing her, so she was the only one to see the long skeletal fingers of the shadow creep slowly up the tender's side. She flinched, but clamped her mouth shut. She was determined not to cry out. If the others saw it, they would know she'd angered Crepuscular, and she would be forced to give up her secret. And the frog boy had only just asked her not to. But the shadow hand was growing, its fingers as long as tree branches, and within a few seconds it had blotted everything outside the rear windows. She had to act before panic overtook her. "We're still half an hour late," she said, trying to keep the tremor from her voice. "Maybe Wilmot's right." Stonker narrowed his eyes at her. "Right about what?" With a tremendous effort, Susie leaned against the door and sighed. "Oh, nothing. He just told me the impossible postal express isn't as fast as it used to be. That's all." She saw the flash of anger in Stonker's eyes. She would probably feel guilty about that later, she reflected, but right now she needed that anger. "I'm sure it's not your fault," she went on. "I mean, this engine does look pretty old after all." "Old?" The tips of Stonker's ears had turned red. "Old?" "It's fine," said Susie. "I'm sure you're doing your best." She caught her breath as the shadow started to seep in under the back door, spreading like spilled ink. "Here's my best, young lady." Stonker threw a large red lever and the locomotive jumped forwards. Susie was thrown to the floor, but looked up just in time to see the shadow sucked back out of sight beneath the door. She had a glimpse of the courtyard and the distant figure of Crepuscular beyond it through the window, before the whole world tipped on its side and the train plunged over the edge of the tower. There was another momentary sense of vertigo, which was only made worse as she struggled to her feet and looked out the front window. The rails stretched down the tower to the desert, which ran closer as the train rocketed down, faster than freefall. Stonker laughed in triumph and threw himself at the mass of brass pipes, valves and levers that covered most of the front wall. They twisted round a wrought iron hearth in which dazzled a blue fire. A mantelpiece stood above it, supporting a carriage clock, a telephone like the one on Wilmot's desk, and what looked like an old-fashioned flip-page calendar in a polished wooden frame. Behind her, meanwhile, Ursel was reaching into an iron hatch she had opened in the rear wall and was pulling out bananas. Yes, bunches of bananas. Instead of eating them, she was throwing them onto the fire, where they fizzed and ignited in showers of blue sparks. "Is this enough for you, my dear?" said Stonker, flashing Susie a triumphant smile as she clung onto the nearest windowsill. She only half heard him. She was more concerned by the wall of desert that was still rushing towards them at incredible speed. She could see the rails ahead of them. They performed a 90-degree turn at the foot of the tower and stretched off across the sands again, but the train could not ever hope to make that turn. Could it? Its momentum was too great. Momentum equals mass times velocity, she thought, as a detached part of her mind set about reviewing the details of her impending death. In other words, the heavier you are, the faster you're going, the longer it takes to change direction. She had no idea what the train's mass was, but it was big, and their velocity? Fast. They would crash headfirst into the desert with the speed of a rocket. There'd be nothing left of them. "Ready?" Stonker was poised at the controls, his fingers hovering over a large dial labelled "This Way Up." The fireplace belched more flames, painting the cab an unnatural hue. The sand rushed up to meet them. Susie sank to the floor and hugged herself. Stonker turned the dial a second before disaster struck, and Susie's stomach did a funny little flip. She picked herself up and looked back out of the windows. Sure enough, they were racing along the ground at the same terrific speed, the shadow of the tower now receding behind them. Voila, said Stonker. That's given us a bit of a kick. An angry dragon couldn't catch us now. Susie had no idea how fast an angry dragon could be, but she was tempted to believe him. The whole world was a blur. The tower was already a tall pencil of shadow on the horizon. Before she could wonder at their speed any further, the phone rang. Without being asked, Ursula reached out and plucked the receiver from the cradle. Rolf, she said, raising it to her ear. She nodded, then extended the receiver to Susie. For me, said Susie in confusion. That'll be the postmaster, said Stonker. Do please thank him for his wise counsel. I don't know how we'd cope without him. He busied himself with the controls again. Susie put the phone to her ear. Hello? Postal operative Susie? Wilmot sounded breathless. Thank goodness, I was afraid we left you behind. I don't want to go down in history as the postmaster who lost his entire staff on their very first delivery. You won't, she said, wondering if he would ever know just how close he had come. Did you deliver the parcel, he asked. Did you get the signature? Susie patted the bulging pocket of her dressing gown and felt a fresh twinge of anxiety. Well, yes, I did. Splendid. In that case, I congratulate you on a successful delivery. I'm sure it will be the first of many. I don't know if it was really successful, she said, twisting the phone cord around her fingers. She felt trapped and guilty. She had stolen the snow globe and broken her vow on her very first delivery. But the snow globe had asked to be stolen, and if it was being delivered against its will, it was hardly a crime, was it? At the very worst, it was a little crime. To prevent a bigger, much worse one? Probably. All that she was sure of was that she couldn't have left the frog with Lady Crepuscular. Nobody deserved that. Not successful? A note of caution crept back into Wilmot's voice. Lady Crepuscular was still cross when we left, said Susie. Very cross, actually. There was a pregnant pause on the end of the line. Did you think she'll file a complaint? Susie pinched the bridge of her nose as she tried to figure out what to say. Surely Wilmot could help her. He was the postmaster. He must know what to do in this sort of situation. What if the frog was right? What if Wilmot was duty-bound to return the package? Could she take the risk? I think she might complain, yes, she said at last. Oh dear, he sighed. I've never had a complaint before. A black mark against our names and reputations. He sighed again. I suppose it was inevitable, and you should still be very proud of yourself. You're part of the team now. Great, said Susie, biting her lip against another stab of guilt. What happens now? Ah, yes, our next job. Let me check my itinerary. She heard the shuffling of papers down the line. It's a collection rather than a delivery, and... Oh, it's this lot. What lot? She said, gripping the receiver a little tighter. Some of our most loyal customers, said Wilmot breezily. They're perfectly harmless. Harmless, she repeated, in a faraway sort of voice, but her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of Stonker clearing his throat. Tell the postmaster we won't get far without a destination on the board, he said, and gave the thing that looked like a calendar a tap. Now that she looked at it properly, Susie saw it wasn't a calendar at all. It was a miniature destination board. The words Obsidian Tower were still displayed on the destination box, with time due listed above and time of arrival below. Don't worry, said Wilmot. I heard. I'm sending it through now. As she watched, the destination board began to change. The letters and numbers flicked over one by one, faster and faster, until they clattered in a cascade of nonsense. Then, in an instant, they stopped, and Stonker's face brightened. See, he grinned, tapping the time of arrival box. We've made up 10 minutes already. How'd you like that? But Susie was more interested in their destination. The Topaz Narrows, she said, reading from the board. That's right, said Wilmot, still on the line. Can you swim at all? Yes, she said cautiously. Why? Just checking, he said. Pop back to the HEC when we get there, and I'll give you all the details. Pop back to the what? She said. But he had already hung up. She replaced the receiver and wondered once again what she had signed up for. Stonker pulled on a short chain hanging from the ceiling, and the whistle let out a mournful howl. I'm always happy to put this place behind me, he said. To sunnier climes. Susie craned her neck to look out of the window again. The tower was now lost to sight completely, and even the army of statues was long behind them. It was just an empty desert stretching in all directions, broken only by the winding tracks and the arch of another tunnel mouth up ahead. Her hand strayed to her pocket. She needed time and some privacy to figure out what she was going to do about the unexpected guest she was carrying. Who was he, and why did the Lady Crepuscular want him so badly? Something told Susie that the old woman would do much worse than to file a complaint if she ever caught up with her. The thought made her shiver. Stonker pulled on the whistle again. As the train plunged into the tunnel, with a rush of air, the desert was gone. That's the end of chapter 6. Can't wait to find out what their next destination is about. We'll see you tomorrow.